Welcome everybody to today's webinar. We're going to get going in a minute or so here. I'm just going to let people load in, and like I said, we'll get started. All right. I see people are still loading in, and it's a little bit after 12, so we're going to get rolling with today's webinar. Again, my name is Jonathan Coleman. I'm Executive Director of the Algoma Workforce Investment Corporation, or AWIC for short. And today we're going to be talking about hybrid and remote work. And this was actually part of a webinar series where we were looking at the opportunities and I guess pitfalls that kind of come with remote and hybrid work in Algoma. This is actually the second of a webinar series. Our first webinar that we had on remote and hybrid work was actually in December. And there we really talked about sort of the trends and some of the opportunities and potential pitfalls of hybrid and remote work, sort of from a big picture perspective. That webinar was recorded and you can find it on our website. And today we're really going to take a look at some of the more technical aspects of remote work and things that employers and organizations should be looking at. Before we get to that, just a few notes of housekeeping. The webinar today will be about an hour. We'll have plenty of time for questions and answers. So we've actually got two guests with us that are going to present, but we'll have plenty of time for Q&A after they're done their presentations. This is a webinar and we're in webinar mode on Zoom. So your mics are muted, but if you do have a question, enter it into the chat function and we'll ask your question for you. And depending on time, we can also, if you have in-depth questions, we can also unmute you if you have a specific question. The webinar today will be recorded. If you want to return to it or share it with colleagues, you're welcome to do that. We'll have it posted on our website. And finally, when we're all done here, we will have a survey when you exit the webinar. If you could fill that out, we'd really appreciate that. That helps us let us know how we're doing. And also you can make suggestions for future webinars and presentations, about local labor market trends and that sort of thing. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce our guests today in today's webinar. Obviously, everybody who's joined us today is interested in the future of hybrid or remote work. We've certainly had a huge testing bed or experiment with remote work over the last 2 years. And I think, we've adapted as employers and organizations, but really, if you're like our organization or AWIC, we just sort of rolled with the punches. But really, we do need now to step back and think about what are the actual best practices. Is hybrid work, the way forward for us and for your organization? And we certainly know that a lot of employees and individuals might be looking to continue with this hybrid model. There were definitely upsides for employees with flexibility, and there are upsides for employers as well. But really now is the time to start thinking about how do we move forward and what is the best way to move forward. And, especially from a technology perspective. So with that in mind, we have two presenters with us today. The first is Ian Grant, and Ian is president of ATS, or Algoma Technology Solutions. Ian, I mean, I'm sure he can share his background, is I think fairly new into the community and has purchased ATS, but he has a wealth of experience and in technology. So he brings with him more than 25 years of technology leadership experience in healthcare, telecommunications, transportation, finance, and nonprofit organizations. So prior to acquiring ATS, he was Director of Information Technology, Infrastructure, and Operations at Lake Ridge Health, where he led critical infrastructure, network, and information security upgrades to 5 hospitals, long-term care homes, and over a dozen healthcare locations. So we're happy to have Ian here. We've also learned that he's not a huge fan of Zoom. So, you know, so even as technical as Ian is, you know, all these different platforms, things like that can cause frustration. So we'll get into that in a minute. And I'll also introduce Rory Ring as well. Many of you will be familiar with Rory. He is the Chief Executive Officer of the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber of Commerce. And he actually joined the Chamber in 2016. And, you know, he has always been focused on the need for a community to build a sustainable and growing economic base from within, while maintaining a strong, open global business philosophy. And he's a firm believer, obviously, in the leadership that that can be provided by the Chamber of Commerce, and also the Chamber of Commerce network, and those professionals whom have decided their professional careers to doing what no other does, each of the chamber communities. I misread all of that, but he sits on as the chair for the chamber, obviously here, and also represents, he sits on the board of the Ontario Chamber of Commerce. And I'd be remiss if I didn't mention, Rory really played a key role in the Algoma Vaccination Support Council, which is obviously helping with the vaccination efforts across all of Algoma. We're very fortunate, obviously, to have him as well join us today, and in our community in general. So with that, Ian, I'll throw it over to you, and I'll stop sharing here.
Thank you very much, Jonathan, for that warm introduction. Really appreciate it. And so let me share my screen. And you're absolutely right. I'm not a big fan of Zoom at all. And I'm more of a Teams person. And that's why this conversation, I think, is really important, is that, you know, we think ahead of what are the tools, what are the necessary things, or the basics that we have to have in place to be able to have a productive, you know, work from home strategy. Although sort of the pandemic sort of threw us into, you know, do it now mode, and without the opportunity to sort of think through it, you know, now is the time for us to sort of step back and start to do that. A matter of fact, as Jonathan pointed out, I acquired ATS about you know, a year ago, and when I came in, we had no work from home strategy. We had no technology in place, being a technology company in place to be able to do that. And we spent the last, you know, year or a few months, you know, organizing ourselves that we can allow for work from home, and happy to report half of my staff work from home today, because we're able to get those things in place, whether they're cloud-based or whether connectivities. And I'll talk a little bit about those things as we dive into it. But before we get into the heavy material, let me just talk a little bit about who we are as an organization, and then I'll introduce myself a little more formally, so I'll give you a perspective of who I am and what I sort of bring to the table in terms of technology. So, you know, ATS has been around for a long time, and some of you have known us as an alarm company, as a telephone company, but we do a lot more than that. We like to brag that we are the most comprehensive technology in the Algoma region, providing technology consultant, design, and implementation of technology services throughout the district and beyond. And we specialize in a number of things: IT services, intrusion detection, CCTV, card access, telecom, and mobile services. And, we have a broad portfolio of technology offering, and not a lot of folks know about this. And part of my mission is to go around and let folks know that we're beyond just a telephone or beyond just an alarm organization. We do a lot more. We invest in the skills here within the region to be able to provide those services to organizations like yourself. A little bit about me. So I've been in technology leadership for about 25 years. I've been in not-for-profit space, healthcare space, transportation, finance, telecom, and I've held a number of positions throughout, right? Director roles in ITF director operations. I've held director of IT security, director of technology and architecture. Really a mouthful. And what the heck does that mean, right? It means from a critical infrastructure and from an IT perspective. If I look at places like Toronto Pearson, I ran IT operations there for a long period of time. So I understand what it is to maintain and to secure critical infrastructure, mission critical to your organization. I've been at Lake Ridge Health, 5 hospitals. I was there when the pandemic hit, and we went a bit nuts there. But lots of dependency on technology, a lot of dependency on offering services beyond just physically being in the hospital. So technology have been there long before we needed it. We needed to use it, and we're tasked into this work from home space, right? It was more of making sure from an HR perspective, policy perspective, those things were in place too as well, right? So let's dive into some of the reality of working from home. And I don't think I'm convincing anyone that work from home is sort of here to stay. It's what are those things that we need to think about. So there's plenty of stats out there that can talk about why it's good to work from home from a productivity standpoint. It's beneficial for employers, for employees. When we're talking about work-life balance too as well, this takes us a lot closer to that work-life balance, right? If we're talking about productivity, performance, engagement, retention, all those things are positive on the plus side, and you can get all sort of stats around that. But my particular talk today is about the technical solution employers should be considering to realize the benefit in a hybrid or remote workplace. So let's talk a little bit about that. So I've sort of laid this out in 3 folds, some of the challenges that we need to think about. One is connectivity. The second one is tools, Zoom versus Teams, and the third being security. And I think if we pay some attention to those 3 things, we can put ourselves in a really good position to be able to benefit from those productivity, whether it's collaboration, whether it's position yourself from a project standpoint to be able to collaborate, on project, have those tools in place to be able to do that. So what I did was I flushed out each one of these. So connectivity, I'll dive a little bit into that to see the options that's available for us to work remotely, whether it's from home or some other remote location. So when it comes to connectivity, there's lots of choices, and being in the north and being sort of remote a little bit, the choices are helpful. Wired is one, right? When I was down in Toronto, there's no question, I can get fiber optic connection to my house or to my business or wherever I am. It's a little more remote here to be able to just have one of those available to you. So being able to have a wireless access to as well. So let me scroll back up to wired to make sure I'm covering off everything here. So from the option standpoint, you've got fiber optic. You've got cable. It's the same cable that physically delivers your TV. And you have DSL. We're moving away from DSL to more cable and fiber. They bring a greater speed, greater bandwidth, connectivity wise. But if those things aren't available, then you can get into a wireless sort of situation where you have, a turbo hub, or you have a wireless home internet. And I happen to be on a WHI wireless internet. And essentially what it is it's an antenna on my roof that's shooting across to some carrier, whether it's Bell or Rogers or Telus, their site, and providing you some decent upload and download speed that if if I'm on a Zoom meeting and I've got my video share, there you don't have that frustration. You've got some decent bandwidth that's supporting all the tools that we're using. And so now that we have some options and how we connect in, and we have decent speed, and how do we then connect into our workplace? Some folks will know, VPN or cloud-based access or virtual desktop. These are some ways of connecting into our workplace, or allowing ourselves to connect securely is a better way of saying it, into our workplace and being able to be productive. So let me dive into a little bit of those and what they are. So as we have our connection set up, we're on the internet, we have some decent speed. Our workplace may say, we have a VPN connection. A VPN connection is simply just a corporate VPN, allows your employees to encrypt and secure their online traffic, right? So I'm home. The workplace is someplace in the city. I'm remote in, and then I've got a key that they provide me, some secret key. As I connect in, the system requests that key. I type that key in, and wham, I'm in, and it gives me access to all my application, all my tools that I'm authorized to have access to. So from a pros and a con, it's VPN has been around for a long time. It's fairly secure and robust. It's scalable, local infrastructure at my place of business. It's flexibility, and it performs well. In terms of a con, if your secret key is compromised, but that's just not specific to VPN. It's specific if I find my password on my laptop, for example, that's compromised. It's the same challenge that I'm dealing with. And there's a little bit of overhead data that eats up a little bit of your bandwidth, but not tremendous amount to see any impact on performance at all. Yeah. Cloud-based remote access. So cloud-based remote access, I happen to love, right? So when I came into ATS, our financial system was on site at ATS at 270 Bruce Street. We had a server in the basement. We have our application on it. We have our work order application there too as well. So people literally have to be in the office to be able to do that, or some sort of remote access into the office as a VPN and such. When I came in, I was certainly used to working from home way before the pandemic hit. I worked for RBC way back when, and I was dealing with Caribbean banking, and so I had a team within the Caribbean, and it was all remote work from home. So the technology has been there for some time, and so we transitioned from on-prem to cloud-based, and now our work order system, or CRM, is all cloud-based data. So my employees can log on to that some secure way, and when we look at our financial system too, the same thing as well, right? So, and our collaboration tools, the same thing. We're cloud-based, and so that was a direct strategy of ours to be cloud-based, to be able to provide that remote access into our office security. Some of the pros and cons: no corporate infrastructure, so I don't need any server in my basement to be running to be able to have access to those tools that I need. I don't have to worry about infrastructure upgrade because the service provider provides that for me, right? So if I take Zoom, for example, which is a cloud-based, they do all of the upgrade and the application in the background. They may send out an announcement to say, you now have new features and they're X, Y, and Z. That upgrade was done. I didn't have to worry about it. It didn't involve me. I just was a product, or I just benefit from that product. IT skills retention maintained with the cloud provider. So I'm a technology company, so I need that skill, but an employer don't need that IT staff fully loaded to be able to support that, because that infrastructure is not on site at all. And then there's this whole notion of share security maintenance is really important. If my infrastructure is at home, it's at the workplace, and I'm connected into that, then I'm responsible as an employee for securing that. If I am in the cloud, I'm Zoom. Zoom has got some responsibility to secure, to make sure that I, the application that I'm connecting to is secure, and someone can tap into this meeting and start showing content that we don't appreciate, right? So all of that is sort of a shared responsibility. I've got some responsibility on my side to make sure that my mobile device that I'm using to connect in, I've got some, whether it's a firewall or some sort of virus protection that's supporting that. But I can go into a little bit more of those details too as well. On the con side, data control, right? So take my CRM, for example. I've got all my customers there. I've got all my work orders there, and so on. That reside with the service provider. So my data is, I got to think about whether or not I'm comfortable with that. When I worked for Lake Ridge, from a hospital perspective and privacy and data, where does data reside? You want to think about things like that, because if it's reside within the US versus Canada, there's some rules and laws around that. So whatever industry you're in, you want to give some consideration to that too as well. Monthly operating costs. Now I'm paying a monthly operating cost. I didn't outlay a capital expense up front, and then I'm benefiting from that years to come. But there's a monthly subscription fee to enjoy that service. And then there's a long-term commitment. Once I'm in the cloud and my data is in the cloud, and the service provider have that, then I want to think very, very, very long and hard about switching next year. No, it's a task that I don't want to take on every year. And so if you can get over those cons, then this model certainly works for us and works for a number of businesses looking to provide work from home opportunities. Another way of connecting in is virtual desktop, and virtual desktop is just a way of saying that there's infrastructure in place that allows me to be able to, on any mobile device, whether home or some remote other location, to connect into my workplace, and it presents back to me a desktop as if I'm sitting at work, and then I get access to all of my application as if I was sitting right there in the office at my desk and seeing my desktop on my computer. So another way of doing that. There's some challenges around that, from my perspective. It's maintained, there's large infrastructure that's involved in that, and you need an IT department that's very skilled to be able to maintain that. The corporate infrastructure is required, and there's some little bit of performance issue in terms of lagging and such. But again, another option and ways that you can connect in to the organization. Online collaboration tools. We got to think about the kind of tools that we want to invest in or to provide the type of productivity that we're looking for, whether it is project based. I've got a project tool that we work through. I can collaborate on that project tool. So not only myself, but my project manager and others can then work on that project at the same time, and so on. Messaging. I want to be able to message an employee to say, hey, what about this? Ask a question quickly. I can do that. If I want to start up or initiate a phone call or a meeting, a Zoom meeting, a team meeting, or what have you. Communication is important. If you want to share documentation too as well, that's important. So some of the tools that we're all used to, of course, one that we're using right now is Zoom. Not my favorite again. I prefer Microsoft Teams, and that's what we use within the organization to be able to share content, to be able to collaborate on documents real time, to start up a meeting, to schedule a meeting, so on and so forth. Avaya is something we happen to provide to some of our customers. Avaya's got a whole platform that not from a video conference, but from a collaboration and from a productivity tool as well. Office 365 is something we happen to use to as well, productivity tools, and so on. G Suite, Skype, WebEx. I think Skype is going away. But those are some of the tools that you need to consider in terms of in terms of how we go forward. One note is this. Throughout my career, I've often see that from a consumer product versus a corporate product. So I would think that I would see that Microsoft Teams is more of a corporate product. I see Zoom is more of a consumer base. And I always see a trend of consumer base creeping into the corporation as opposed to the other way around. So even though, you know, Zoom is not my favorite, it's becoming a platform because it's widely used from a consumer standpoint that's creeping into the office space to say, hey, you know, we should be using this. And there's benefits around that. You know, there's you know, as simple as it is, there is no training that's required because folks on their own are using it to Zoom with their folks, with their kids or family members and so on. So they are self-training. When it came to Microsoft Teams, for example, you know, training session had to be initiated within the organization because there wasn't that self training that's happening to as well. So just a point on that. And brings me down to my last few slides. Security is a big concern. We should be thinking about security. What are those basic things that we should have in place to make sure that we're connecting security? Whether it's a VPN, that's one way of doing it too as well, but it doesn't mitigate you know, our mobile devices and how we connect into the workplace. Security threats are on the rise. So there's no doubt about it. There are, you know, you look at the news, you see, you know, whether it's a ransomware or you see some sort of threat, right? So want to make sure that we're putting the basic things in place. So ransomware, Trojan horse, phishing, crypto mining are some of the ones that are on the rise. And so basic tools in place to protect yourself against those things when we are working from home or logging on from home into the office or in a cloud environment. And so a couple of things from a basic standpoint, we always suggest that, you know, a basic firewall should be in place. You know, and I think about a firewall as a home. And if I'm leaving my house, I want to make sure the doors are locked. So that's what the firewall will do for us, ensuring that you know, we don't have any open ports into our system or mobile device and such, right? So lock the door as you leave. It's basic, and I think it should be in place. From an endpoint protection or mobile devices or laptop, our smartphones and such, you know, some basic antivirus protection around that. So if a virus does hit our PC, we have some way of dealing with it. So those are the two basic things I think we should have in place. And with that, it brings me to my end. So let me just summarize a little bit, and then Jonathan, I'll turn it back over to you. So, you know, working from home is actually here, and not trying to convince anyone that it's not. I think, you know, three pillars that we should think about: connectivity, tools, 100%, and then security. So if we sort of frame our strategy around that and how we think about the offering, I think we'll be, you know, in good shape to be able to have the best practices in place to be able to provide a productive work from home strategy. With that, you know, sort of like a shameless plug for ATS, and for additional questions, please reach out. I can talk about this stuff for, you know, for days and days. So by all means. And with that, happy to answer any questions if there are any. Jonathan, I'll hand it back over to you.
Yeah, Ian, I think what we'll do is we'll hold questions until the end, and then, you know, we'll just have questions for both yourself and Rory come up. So I think, Rory, if you want to share your screen. Rory is obviously going to present, but just for perspective, the Sault Ste. Marie Chamber has gone fully remote. You know, so I'm excited to hear Rory's perspective from that process, and then also just about supports that might be available for employers as they move to hybrid or remote. So Rory, take it away.
Great, thanks, Jonathan, and thanks, Ian. Great presentation. And just so folks know, Ian is actually one of our board of directors as well. So we're privileged to have Ian on our team. And prior to Ian's joining us, we did move into the fully remote structure for the Chamber of Commerce. We're probably one of the only ones in Canada. There's a few of us, I think, in North America, but we've made that decision and we've made it strategically, sort of given, I think, the principles that I just want to run through here, because to get to those technical decisions, I think you've got to do some steps to really make sure you're aligned with, at the end of the day, the purpose of your business, right? And that means understanding where you are from a strategic perspective, and then from an operational perspective, what's your purpose, what's your why, and how do you assess your fulfillment of that? So I'll just walk through some of these principles. They really are sort of a little bit, you'll notice maybe a strategic planning kind of basis, but I think it's very important for you to do these things if you are trying to make this decision on a more permanent basis, as opposed to being forced into them via a pandemic. Because if you're going to move into a more permanent basis, you're obviously going to make some very strategic procurements, as we see, from Ian's presentation. A lot of choices out there, and it really depends on what you're trying to accomplish. So I just want to look through the business environment, how we looked at our own mission, vision, and values in consideration of alignment, looking at our strategic plan deliverables and how remote impacts that, has the potential to change the way you deliver products and services, and then really what you need to do in terms of assessing the risk. And that has a lot to do with retention, acquisition, and depletion of your human resources, as well as some of your technical resources and capital infrastructure, like Ian has addressed. And then really just, what kind of impact analysis you should be doing in terms of assessing human resources, financial, and then just closing around some considerations around brand, what it means for you in terms of brand. So, for us, we ran through a very typical process of looking, what's referred to as a pest analysis, but just making sure that you get yourself looking at this from a very high level. And you'll need to understand sort of where your business unit is at and what influences, policy and legislation and pandemic protocols will have. And that has been very, very fluid over the last 2 years. We are starting to see a move back to more longer term planning. You're starting to see those things happen now. And despite the disruptions that are happening in the Ukraine, you still need to make sure that you have a long view of where you're positioning yourself in terms of the influences that, policy and legislation can have, plus also the preparedness if pandemic protocols were to be reinstated, if the virus again changes and mutates into something more deadly. And then from an economic perspective, what are the constraints? How, if you're moving to a remote format, does it fit with your market access? And are there impacts on how you get to market? And some of that can be technology based as well, right? So if you're using some of those tools, like Ian says, can you build those tools now that your customers are able to access your technology, and your relationship changes because of removing some components of face-to-face ways of doing business? And then how does that look from your customer side? Or you're implementing technology and, there's no receptiveness on the other side, then those investments in the technology are somewhat mute unless you're partnering with your customers to ensure that they can utilize the technologies that are offered, right? So, your great story. We like Zoom, Ian hates Zoom. I hate Teams, Ian loves Teams, but we still have to be compatible in your uses, right? So that, has impact on your economic modeling, right? Then it also, is understanding the financial markets too, because sometimes acquiring this infrastructure takes considerable capital investment takes training investment in your human resources. And, much of us fund ourselves through some kind of borrowing arrangements in the financial markets. We're starting to see interest rate implications now from inflation. So you need to understand the impacts of that financial market to understand lender risk tolerance changes, right? So, removing physical assets means you're removing things that a bank can take as security, and the movement of banks towards technology, especially, cloud-based stuff, is really to mitigate the amount of risk that they expose themselves to in very soft assets, right? So you got to understand some of those issues. Then, obviously the social impact, the human impact, making sure your communications are prioritized, like Ian is saying, and reprioritization of these are some basic needs, right? And that's a reference to like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The need, you're looking at different ways of implementing technology. How do you fulfill the human need for socialization, for recognition? So, I suggest taking a look at those things to ensure that you're still embracing the key elements that the human being needs in terms of fulfillment with their role in your organization. And then technology, I just won't go into that because Ian, you just gave a brilliant review of the many things that out there that have to be considered. But you also got to look at the availability and also the ability to support the technology, the lifespan, how renewable is it? Is the technology advancing? Are you an early adopter, or are you going to get in later when the technology is a little bit more mature? That has certain risks associated with it: security, internal capabilities, and to degree, what are you going to be outsourcing? So for us, outsourcing was the way for us to go. We're a very small team, and it made sense in the early stages. When I came on board 6 and a bit years ago now, we were very much paper-based. Everything was done, an Excel spreadsheet or Microsoft Word, and that's how we managed our business. And we moved away from that into a CRM. We made sure that we put our financial tools connected to our CRM, and that was all became cloud-based, right? But we managed the security side as an outsourcing with the local firm. So on the other side, you go back into your basic strategic planning, SWOT analysis, right? Understanding internal and external resources, capabilities, what your cash flow is, how you might finance it, what are your customers' relationships, the weaknesses, will the customer transition to change? You see some real challenges around where business to business used to be face to face. And, we've moved away from that. And then, is that a strength or is it a weakness? And as you start to adopt these remote strategies, again, back to market impact, spelling should say competitive position, not completive. Love spell check. But the competitive position, what is what are you doing? Are your competitors doing the same thing? Or is this going to offer you an advantage? And then also, are you going to miss emerging markets or mature marketing size, your talent, your communications? Are those strengths or those weaknesses? You got to keep those things. The other side of this is first mover advantage, right? If you can apply technology and be the first mover, you can really stave off a lot of competitive movement if you're the first to get to market with embracing new technology. And that could be your ordering systems, how you process customer interactions, using artificial intelligence, inventory controls, a lot of different things that you can do in terms of adopting technology to create opportunity. And then would you look at potentially product service rationalizations, right? So when we looked at our own model, we moved from a high face-to-face environment to virtual, basically overnight. And that allowed us to take a look at, well, should we be doing, when we get back to our face-to-face, do we actually need to do these things? And as the market changed, where other things become a priority as opposed to what you think are a priority, right? So those assessments you really got to be able to do, and then understand your return on investment, cost reductions versus revenues, right? For us, moving to a remote environment, we lost 30,000 in lease obligations, right? And office overheads. And that helped us protect the risk associated with our membership, which is 90% small business, right? And a very critical component. And then, just making sure that those threats, you're not losing engagement, the market rejects your transition, you have challenges with implementation, operational alignment, the cash whirlpool, just getting, trying to buy the newest and greatest and getting sucked into, just cash after cash after cash. And then, realizing what's happening to your brand. So then, the launch control, and this is, as Ian said, mission critical, right? So, everyone needs to be involved if possible. And at a minimum, the employees that are directly impacted, your senior leadership, and the management and board. So we report to a board of directors. The board of directors had to understand what we were trying to accomplish is we were spending money. And quite frankly, we were spending money when the chamber was, in a position of actually losing money as we rationalized our operations. And that commitment is absolutely essential to have from your senior leadership team or your board of directors. But also you got to make sure you're talking to your resources, which are your, the holy trinity of the bankers, lawyers, and accountants. But also you need to be able to tap into government agencies, your peers, chambers of commerce, business support organizations that are local, provincial, or federal. Things like we have the Community Development Corporation, they have funding mechanisms. Or if you're in tourism, there's the Tourism Development Fund. So there's a lot of places that you can access resources, whether it be informational or dollar wise. And then making sure that your mission target is specific. You can measure it, it's actionable, and it's realistic. And you set it with some time bounds, and you understand what that expected result is going to be. But you obviously need some flexibility there too, right? Which is done in the implementation and the execution of that plan. So the big thing here is to over communicate, then start to back off. Everybody needs to know what's happening. You just don't throw the on switch and your tech works, right? You need to make sure that you're building tech that's good for your human resources and is easily adaptable to your business model, right? And then to be patient as well and be ready for anything, success, roadblocks, and failures. If anything, the pandemic has taught us, the essential need to be flexible in our approach. So as a Chamber of Commerce, our reference is our vision, and we just finished doing our strategic plan. And when you're implementing this, it is a strategic endeavor. And if you have commitment to a long-term vision and mission, that has to be the absolute guiding post for you as you start to make some of these decisions. And then for us, our value system, as you can see, everything we do is based on decisions that are membership centric, right? So if we embrace the remote workforce, how do we stay in touch with our members? How do we, commune with our members? How do we convene our members? Do we have the ability to do that if you're in a remote environment? And then, are our staff up to the task? Respect, integrity, excellence, teamwork, accountability, transparency, and sustainability, all key elements that, you really still have to take a look at these things, even on excellence, committed to the highest standard. You can't always take the lowest cost, lowest tech solution if you're a high value brand, right? So those are a lot of things that you need to ensure. Accountability, again, not only internally and to the team, but also externally to the membership, to making sure that you're executing on your value proposition to them, right? So for us, the engage piece, when you think about moving into a remote environment, a huge challenge because, obviously people get screened out on Zoom. And we just did again for the second year, International Women's Day, a virtual conference, if you like. And while it's not still the same, it still offers an opportunity for folks to convene, but it means our staff has to be able to be familiar how to run this, a webinar, right? And then we got to make sure that we're still executing on those objectives that allow us to create invaluable services, create strong membership relationships, create revenue generating opportunities, advance the use of technology to engage our members. So again, us moving to the remote, as long as we're marrying up the adoption of technology to the remote format, and we can still execute on these things, that's really where you get into that smart, measurable example and discussion, right? And then empowering, bringing together our membership, the private sector, all government levels to create economic prosperity, right? And how then are we going to do these things about, the objective of promoting diversity and sustainability and economic resilience, independent growth, business growth? It's programming for us as a Chamber of Commerce, is programming and services like our Trade Accelerator program, learning management system, our disability discoverability network. These are all programs that now have moved into, the virtual space, and most likely will continue that way. And then how do we start to marry those kind of things up when we move back into more face-to-face transactions and relationships? So it's to bring those hybrid worlds together. Can we still do that? And still can we measure how we achieve those successes, right? So these are the elements of our strategic plan that, we really have to go through and amplify your voice, because we do a lot of advocacy work, and it's actually being enhanced through the remote. Like, we can get our MP or MPP on a virtual call. We can hold town halls virtually without congregating. And when you look at that, it reduces our costs of delivering actually on that engagement, because now we're not renting a hall. We're not having to provide lunch. We're not doing those things. So we've lost on the cost side of things, but we don't have the ability to charge a little bit extra to compensate us for our work. So in setting up, the remote virtual experience. So that's where we changed our business model to rely a little more heavily on the sponsorship from within our business community. So you got to, think about those things. If you're going to implement, it drives costs down, but what's the impact on your revenue side, right? So, we've been very lucky to be very well supported by our membership and adopting a new sponsorship kind of model for us. And then creating, awareness. The governments, all levels of government, have really adopted, I think, quite positively, and being receptive in terms of this kind of communication, or receiving emails, or in some cases even text, so that we can not only communicate with our elected officials, but for us, it's key to ensure that we're inside the halls of Queen's Park or Ottawa or Foster Drive, connecting with the public administration, because that's really, at the end of the day, who's responsible to get things done. The remote capability and the acceptance of that in those spheres is actually enhanced our ability to do and to deliver on those kind of things. And then maintaining the profile of the chamber. We're recognized nationally as a very progressive Chamber of Commerce, with the Canadian Chamber of Commerce and the Ontario Chamber of Commerce, and within the associations of our profession, both provincially and federally as well. And again, enhanced through the communications, as long as your organization understands how we're delivering that communication and how vital it is, and what the response times are going to be, right? So that's kind of really critical in the comm side. And you're working now in the world of now. So, making sure that you're back in a timely and responsible manner, and technology can help you do that. And then performing on our side, a commitment to keep the Chamber of Commerce in the world of modern and optimized technology infrastructure, and to continue our financial stability. So again, looking at that cost and revenue model. But for us, we also have to address the markets and the risks associated with that, because, when you take a look at our membership structure, we're heavy on retail, services, financial, all of them, food service and accommodation, all of them, which have been, dramatically impacted by the pandemic. So we have to make sure that we're maintaining a strong eye on our financial sustainability, and then also to make sure that we adopt a succession plan, right? So as I always say to my board, what do we do if I get hit by a moose? You know, how are we going to do these things? And how do we use and ensure that, you know, we have an adoptive way to ensure that we continue on, right? And that's part of the security that Ian refers to. How do you share code keys or passwords? You know, a number of those elements to keep in mind. And then I recommend, you know, this book here by David Kincaid, Level 5 Strategy, The Brand-Driven CEO, Embedding Brand into Your Business Strategy. Because when we think about this, of all those things we talked about, it all culminates in this notion of brand and what you're trying to present. And the value, his definition, is the value of a promise consistently kept. And what you look at then is protecting your brand during that transition by really kind of knowing what processes are, what your intellectual property is, what partnerships you have, and then who are the people in your organization that do and affect the representation of your brand. And the leader of your organization, the CEO, whatever you call yourself, has to be at the center of that and be actively involved. It used to be, you know, in a CEO's position, all you did was delegate. The world has changed because you really need to make sure that your CEO is bought into making sure the brand is the first element of consideration. So, you know, we took a look at our business model and said, okay, what is it that's being done that doesn't enhance our brand? Bookkeeping, accounting, you know, roles of my people in the organization, you know, those don't enhance my brand. They're absolutely necessary for your business, but they don't enhance the brand of the Chamber of Commerce. Doing my own IT doesn't enhance the brand. The end product enhances my brand, but me running around trying to solve, you know, computer issues or connectivity issues, security, you know, those are things that in a small organization like ours do nothing to enhance the brand from a, you know, an operational and tactical perspective. So it's really key to make sure that your leader is helping structure these four pieces of the wheel. And then at the end of the day, it's your people, right? Your people are your brand. You know, you got to make sure that your company's organized structure ensures that employees deliver your brand promise consistently and within a rapidly changing marketplace, right? And that's some things that are difficult to manage when, you know, again, we talk about managing different platforms, you know, Zoom versus Teams. You know, if you don't have consistency in your organization, you can be struggling trying to manage just your brand image through that management of technology. Do you look for qualities in the new employees that'll further your consistent delivery of your brand? New hires, making sure that you're training them and what your brand looks like and what you want it to do. And the employees, and investing in the training in your employees, but also within your hiring process, making sure that they're ones that know how to implement a brand promise, and then rewarding those employees and delivering on your brand and consistently doing that and making sure you're measuring performance of your employees and delivering your brand promise, communicating to your employees again about the need to deliver that brand promise, and then making sure that you've defined and aligned your core competencies to suggest that the key roles and processes required to consistently deliver your brand promise to internal and external stakeholders, right? So you're talking about a system and plugging in technology and deciding whether to go fully remote, hybrid, or back into office with technology, all really at the end of the day has to support your brand. And that's, you know, the major consideration that we had at the Chamber of Commerce as we've moved into a fully remote environment. And I'll say, you know, a lot of the things that we base our success on is how many members do you have, or how many new members have you been to acquire, and how many members have you lost? And, you know, and we're in a great position of turning the organization around from losing some money to making a little bit of money and breaking even, you know, and making some money that we can reinvest into the membership. And we've grown the membership over the last little bit as well, and actually using technology by driving people to our website to complete the transaction. So thank you very much, Jonathan. I appreciate that. I know that was a lot. And I know we're getting close to time, but hopefully we can take some questions.
Thanks, Rory. And yeah, it's just a good reminder that technology is obviously a tool, and it's here to serve us and to use it. And you don't want to lose focus of your core business or your core deliverables, your core clients, things like that, as you make these technical decisions. So as Rory said, welcome to ask questions, and we'll take questions through chat. I have a few questions I wanted to ask. And Ian, I'll start with you, and I'll just preface by saying, maybe these are unfair questions, but as Rory was saying, obviously we have a lot of small businesses, not-for-profit businesses, things like that, where we don't have IT departments, we don't have HR departments. As we were going through these presentations, I was thinking of my perspective, where there's a bit of change in, I guess, IT spending. I mean, typically we budget for like hardware, laptops, our website, and maybe purchasing software, but obviously things are changing to more subscription-based, suites of services. Here's my unfair question. I guess, so for like a smaller business, like let's say 5 to 10 people, what is there a ballpark that we should be budgeting for now, like for IT, like now that, that's my question. It's unfair, but is there a ballpark number?
No, I mean, it is a consideration, right? I mean, especially in this climate, when you look at inflation and you look at the cost of run the business and so on, it's a fairly, but I would answer it this way: it ranges, right? It ranges greatly, and maybe I'm not providing to you, because even in a larger organization, IT spending is a concern, and we want to make sure that we're delivering value back to the organization, right? And so is there a amount? So if I start to go down the stack, and okay, you're budgeting for PC, you're budgeting for internet connection, some software, you're budgeting for some protection, whether it's firewall or such, and yeah, right, it's subscription based now. So and everybody's sort of moving to that model. It's really hard to say what it is, because it's based around your organization's need, right? And so if you have a CRM online, for example, or Microsoft Office 365 online, I mean, I can use me as an example, right? And maybe so. We're an organization of 22 folks, and so licensing costs around Microsoft could range from anywhere from $5 a month per seat per employee, all the way up to about $9 or $10, depending on what version you want, right? So a subscription for my CRM is really around the $20 to $30 a seat to, as well, my financial system on a yearly basis to provide access to 10 employees, because not everyone needs access to everything, so you got to figure that out too as well. So I mean, that can range about $1,000 yearly. So you can see it's certainly about what the needs are and who needs access to it, because you don't want to say, for my organization, for example, I have 22 folks, all 22 need access to the financial system. We don't. So we can scale that back and start to understand it a little bit. Hopefully I shed a little bit of light on it, but it's that, I mean, it's a difficult question to answer.
Yeah, I guess as you're talking, I mean, obviously, if most organizations are already working from laptops, maybe not desktops, I guess the incremental costs, you're probably already, paying for these services like 365 or whatever. So it's not actually like a huge jump.
No.
necessarily to go to hybrid.
No. And in my world, it was more that, do I renew my on-prem product versus to go to a subscription model where I'm paying a monthly? In all my analysis, it's always been a cost savings to go to my subscription model. When you start to look at things like, if you have software on-prem, it breaks, I need to upgrade it, I need to support it, and so on. So I move all those out, and I pay a one-time fee for someone to worry about my upgrade, worry about if it breaks, you just fix it. If I have trouble with it, I have a number to call. And so, when you do the analysis, in my case, it's a cost savings to move into a subscription base for me.
So I guess
if I just make a comment there, because this is the process that we went through, right? We had, in situ server, but it was getting towards its end of life, which would have been, okay, well, we're going to have to invest, let's say $6,000 to pull it out and put a new one in, then you need a premise for that, so you got to go through that modeling. And like you say, like, we're a small team, but not everybody needs access to the financial system, but they need access to the CRM. They need access to the back end of the website. So you got to go through that and understand what your business model is, and before you start to decide how that investment's going to look like, right? And for us, the upgrading, like Ian says, was critical, right? So now I don't have to mess with any of that, because again, you go back to that notion, does it enhance your brand, right? If you're trying to manage all your upgrading and purchase this and that software, whereas, the plug and play model really works well for some organizations, and it actually can provide you with more efficiency, which is a way of saving money. And that has its own impacts, right? So you may pay a little bit more over time, but the efficiency that you're going to achieve from it is certainly going to outweigh the cost.
Yeah, and I guess that kind of leads to my next question, which I'm sure you probably do, but I guess, like, do you offer then like an assessment, I guess, for an organization? And it's obviously, it's like a holistic assessment. Like, this is how this is what we do. This is our back office. This is how we interact with our customers. This is how we, want to move forward, I guess. Is that
So
the starting point?
Part of our core is that we don't sell anything that we don't do ourselves, or the majority of what we sell, we do ourselves. So when we undergo an assessment, when we undergo a strategic IT plan, we have done that for ourselves. I mean, within ATS itself, I've done that throughout the life of my career. So the short answer is yes. We can step through, and these aren't. There's no magic to these or secret to these. I mean, it's a matter of come in and ask the questions, right? And then realize from a collaboration tool, what do you do for collaboration tool today, if anything, and so on, and step through it. And then at the end of it, there is a number that spits out that says, hey, this is the number, from a monthly standpoint, or however you want to structure that, versus what that capital investment would be. And a capital investment you would have to reinvest every 4 years, because technology life cycle, maybe 5 years you can squeeze out of it, but the servers and the application and the upgrades and the skill you need on site to be able to do those things. So we look at it from a holistic view, and then present that back for a decision can be made around that.
Yeah, and I guess.
I'm just
Sorry, just on that, Ian, and I guess it'd be modular as well. I mean, and like, you could do this now and then move to this and move to that kind of thing.
Yeah, it can be, and that's why I love when an organization has a strategy, because you can map that against a strategy, right? Here's my long-term outlook on what I'm trying to achieve, right? And then you can phase it in. To be able to do this portion or this portion or this portion to align along that strategy. I mean, even if it's just a stated strategy as opposed to a written strategy, and most small businesses know what they're trying to achieve, and they can articulate it very nicely, and then you sort of map it against that.
Yeah, sorry to cut you off, Rory.
No, that's fine. No, that's great, because along the same lines, in the assessment side, one of the things that it has to be assessed. And I'll be honest, we missed this part was our telecom provider, has a clause in their agreement that says we're going to renew your commitment to us every 3 years automatically without telling you. So when we went to move from, hard line to remote, I'm faced with potentially a $1,500 penalty, right? And that's a cost. They're quite honest. We just kind of went like, okay, I thought I would just give you 90 days notice and we're out. And it's like, no, you owe us a cancellation fee, right? So I'm still sitting there with 3 lines that I don't necessarily use. I mean, we still use them and I still pay for them. But, when we match that up against a $1,500 fee to transition, right? So you got to make sure you're looking at all the commitments that you have and where they stand as part of that assessment.
That's a great point, Rory. And not only telecommunication, you look at software. Software is based like that too as well, right? You could be executing, your strategy to align with when your software expires, right? And if you're a month into it, they don't offer a month renewal. It's a full year's renewal, right? And you only need, so those are the kind of things you need to flush out to make sure that you're taking all the costs into account. That's a great point.
And Rory, I had a question for you. I mean, again, like a lot of this stuff isn't new, obviously, but I guess just from the chamber perspective and even maybe the Ontario chamber, like, are we going to see again more like co-sharing spaces or open spaces where if you have a hybrid workplace, maybe you don't have a place of business but you'll have more co-sharing spaces for like meetings or
no, absolutely. I think you are going to see some of that. I actually had a conversation with the local business yesterday who's looking at converting their showroom into a shared space. It allows them to do a couple things, right? Feature some of their tech and their new office stuff, but it also gives them the opportunity to provide a service that can generate some revenue. I think like in Sault Ste. Marie and in most of Northern Ontario, the co-share space is still pretty much in its infancy, where in Southern Ontario, it's a lot more, a lot more intense, but that's, density of market too, right? So I think you will start to see that. And actually people will take a look at that, as part of a relocation. So if you're looking, as people coming back to Sault Ste. Marie, and I've had a number of these stories coming back to Sault Ste. Marie, they work remote, used to live in, Burlington or whatever, come to Sault Ste. Marie, they're remote, their business is moved to a remote model. So now you actually have choices of places to live, but you'll still need to hold some meetings if you still have local market, right? So I think you'll see some need for co-space there, but you'll also need something that's adaptive to a lot of the new technologies to make sure that you're presenting your brand, right? And you may need more sophisticated technology where co-space can happen, shared office infrastructure, so I think you're going to see that trend grow. You'll also, I think, see a lot more hybriding, 3 days in the office, 2 days out, 2 days in the office, 3 days out. Because what we've seen, especially when you want to get women back into the workforce, there's a real desire now to put, personal needs first in the work environment. So I think you've seen a lot of that change. So as people move into these hybrid models, part of that might mean using some of this shared space to be adaptive to that.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, it's obviously we are living in interesting times. And again, a lot of these things are not new, but now the exposure to everything has happened. And, I think it's a good time now to really think about, as an organization, what do you want to take advantage of? And certainly, like Rory, as you were saying, like there be competitive advantages. I mean, we have a very tight labor market. So it could help you attract people if you had a very flexible work environment, and we're, well down the line to offering hybrid.
Sure. Yeah, when you're looking at that, I think, and Ian would probably have a comment about this, is about technology compatibility. Like there's a lot of, like, I get emails all the time about event management software, about this, that, and the other thing. And it's, Some of them are complete packages, some of them are just standalone, right? So it's a lot of things. And that's the same thing, I think, Ian, as you would say, whether it's hardware or software or cloud-based, eh?
Yeah, I would agree. And when you look at even cloud-based, let's just take that for example, right? And if you're diverse in cloud, you know, you have a Amazon versus a Azure and Microsoft, and you have products that within both, and you're trying to integrate those across to as well, right? That presents its challenges to as well. So it's there's a lot to think about and to consider as you move. So, you know, taking the opportunity to sort of sit back and analyze it and assess it, and you know, a lot of things that you talked about, Rory, match with the technology piece. It just makes sense for the opportunity to be able to have some time to be able to be, you know, strategizing how you go forward to be able to mitigate some of these things.
Excellent. Well, I'm going to call it there. I think we've answered all the questions that were up online. So I want to thank everybody for attending, and obviously thank both Ian and Rory for the presentation. As I mentioned at the beginning, it was recorded, so it will be available on the AWIC site in our events section. So you can revisit it and share it with colleagues. If you do have a further question for Ian or Rory, you know, you can definitely get it to me, and I can get it to either of them. But having said that, I want to thank both of you for presenting, Ian and Rory, and thank everybody for attending. I hope everybody has a great day, and you know, this gives you some food for thought on how to, you know, kind of move forward with a hybrid or remote strategy, and in a purposeful way, I guess. So hopefully this has answered some questions and at least given you some comfort in knowing that there is support available. We're not in this kind of journey alone, and you know, let's see what we can do for the best of our organizations in Algoma as we work our way through this. So thank you, guys.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, thank you very much.
Thanks, Ian. See you later.